What's going on, everybody? Welcome back. Guys, before we get going, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button for me. I hope you're having a wonderful start to your weekend. I hope you had a wonderful week, and it's only going to get better from here, baby. All right, guys, I had someone ask me, who was I locked up with? What, like, it's craziest people. And I'm not even going to use the word crazy because each one that I'm going to talk about today was honestly some of the nicest people I've ever spoke to in my life. And they was very generous. If you needed something, they made sure you got that something. And, you know, then when you find out what they're in for, you're like, damn. Well, but anyway, guys, a couple that stand out is, like, I was in my second bit was in Farrington, New Jersey. And I had said it's a lot of Mafia family members were there, you know, locked up. And the first one I ever met was the first night that I got to Farrington. And when you're getting transferred from prison to prison and all that, 99% of the times, you'll get there before all your possessions, your clothes or anything that you own, your radio, anything you own, you'll beat your property there. So I remember going there, and I walked in, I found what cell I was in and all that, and then I just kind of walked out. I put my stuff in my cell, my bedroll and all that, and then I walked out and I was on the second floor, and I just kind of stood there and just looked around. I'm like, all right, what am I into now? Well, as I'm sitting there looking, I have someone come up and tap me on my shoulder, and I look over, and it's just a little old guy. And when I say old, he was like, I think he was 70-ish at the time. And, you know, he was an Italian guy. And he asked me my name and all that, and I shook hands with him. Very nice guy. And he said, you know, what am I sorry? Like, where did I get transferred? Do I have what I need? All that kind of stuff. His big thing was, do you have everything you need until the rest of your stuff get here? Because that time I was like, I don't have nothing. I was like, I have my bedroll and the clothes on that I'm wearing right now. Well, he said, come here. And I went with him, and we walked in his cell, and he gave me like I said before, little Walkmans. You know, he's got the little earbud or earphones and all that. That's what our TVs ran off of. So if we was going to watch TV, you won't hear it. You can see the picture, but you won't hear it unless if you have the radio, because each TV had its own radio station. So you can go like 100.4 would be this TV, and 100.17 would be that TV, you know, so on. Excuse me. But he gave me that and gave me a pair of socks. And, you know, said, are you hungry? I was like, no, I'm good. I don't need anything to eat. And I was like, man, I really appreciate this. Thank you so much. As soon as my stuff gets here, I'll give this back to you. He's like, cool, no problem. And we shook hands, and I left. And I met this other guy, this little white guy from Rhode Island. Ended up being one of my best friends in there. Really cool kid. But he asked me, he goes, you got everything you need? I was like, yeah, this older guy right here just let me use the radio and all that. And he said, you know who that is? I was like, no. Just freaking got here, dude. He goes, that's Mikey Perna. Mikey Perna was a big guy in the Mafia. And I'll be honest, I couldn't tell you what family it was. But he was a big Mafia guy. One of the nicest people I've ever met in my life. I was like, no shit. I was like, all right, cool. And he was like, he said, did he come up alone and talk to you? I was like, yeah. He's like, oh, that's rare. I was like, what do you mean? And he said, just watch over the next few days. Watch the people around him. Mikey was surrounded by people, you know, and it was people just watching his back. Younger guys, you know, in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, stuff like that. Because like I said, Mikey was around 70. But he was the coolest guy one of the coolest guys I ever talked to. You know, so that was my first Mafia interaction, a guy in the Mafia. But like I said, awesome freaking guy. And then a few weeks later, they brought in another guy from the Mafia. This guy, again, super nice guy. But once I heard about him and, you know, shit like that, this dude was stone cold. His name was Alfonso Persico. They called him Alley Boy. He was one of the big guys in the Colombo family, I believe. Colombo, I believe is what it was. But he was super cool. He was in there. He just beat a RICO charge, and he was in there for a murder charge, and he was waiting for his trial, and then they was going to ship him. If he was found guilty, they was going to ship him wherever he was supposed to go, which I found out he did have his trial. He was found guilty, and they moved him to, I believe it was Florida. But Ali, awesome guy. One of the smartest freaking people I think I've ever spoke to in my life. Guy was a freaking little genius. I mean, it doesn't matter what it was, he knew about it. If it could be something, math, knew it. English, knew it. History, knew it. Anything going on in the world today, knew it. Anything going on in the world in the past, knew it. The guy was just a sponge of knowledge. But again, super nice guy, kept to himself. You know, he talked to people, but he kind of did his own thing. And I never saw anybody with an interaction with this guy, especially in an aggressive interaction, because Ali was a big boy. I mean, he wasn't huge, but he was like probably 50, I guess, when he was in there. And he was a stocky dude, man. But, you know, those was my first two Mafia people I met in the Mafia. And I thought that was super cool. But then I met two other people that when I found out what they have done, I'm like, that guy? Him? No, he couldn't do that. But because it was super cool. I never had a problem with these people. And like, there was a guy who was an older black guy. His name, he went by Muhammad. I don't know if that was his God-given name or whatever, but that's what he went by in prison. And he was one of those guys that he just oozed respect. I mean, you know, you better respect me was his thing. And I don't care what you say, what you do, but you will respect me type thing. And, you know, I talked to his cell was actually next to my cell. And, you know, I talked to him, you know, really nice guy. And I talked to, remember the guy I told you about, I became good friends with from Rhode Island. Like, he had been there for a few years. And he was actually cellmates with Muhammad. And one day I was talking to him. I was like, tell me about Muhammad. I was like, what's up with that? I was like, you know, he's a very religious guy. You know, I was like, oh, well, what did you get called with drugs or something? I mean, what? It's a nice, religious, older guy. He's like, dude. He's like, okay. He said, let me tell you. Yeah, he was in Philadelphia. Muhammad lived in Philadelphia prior to his arrest. And he was in a gang. I could not tell you what gang it was because I never talked to this guy about anything from his past. Especially after I found out what he had done to get where he was. You know. But, you know, he was in a gang in Philly. And evidently this rival gang killed Muhammad's brother in a fight. You know, shot him, beat him to death. I'm not really sure how he died, but he died. And, you know, so Muhammad thought it would be okay, that it would be suitable for him to go find one of the gang members who happened to be high up into the gang. I think he was a brother or son of one of the shot callers of that gang. And Muhammad thought it would be a good idea to show them, you don't mess with us, by taking that dude that he found from the other gang, killed him, cut his head off. And let me say it again. Cut his head off. And took it. And a lot of the gang members and stuff had a bar in Philly that they went to that a lot of them hung out. So he went to this bar. All right? And he was outside the front door on the sidewalk and made sure that people was in there that needed to see this. And they were, and some of them came outside. Muhammad had that dude's head in his hand and took it and set his head in the middle of the street. And, you know, then got arrested. And that's why he was in there. But do you understand what I just said? He cut the dude's head off and put it in the middle of the street. Could you imagine driving down there and not knowing what's going on? Just driving, oh, honey, look at that. That's a nice looking building. What the fuck is in the road? You know, could you imagine that? I mean, come on. But then the one that beats it all, his name, not just giving out last names here, his name is Ron. And Ron was like 75, 77 or something at the time. Little old white guy, little bitty guy, but a really cool guy. And I talked to him a lot. I was good friends with his cellmate, which got me interacting with Ron. And I would talk to Ron a lot, and he was just a lonely old man that just liked to talk. Well, you know, I talked to him one day, and he asked me what I was in there for, and I was like, I robbed the bank. And, you know, I was like, okay, cool. He asked me, so I'm going to ask him. Well, I don't think I should have done that. I asked him, and he said this as calm as anything I've ever seen in my life. Like, I was more shook up by the story than him telling the story. But he lived in a little upper class neighborhood and I think he had two girls and three sons was his children, and was been married for like 30 or 40 years, something like that. It's been a lifelong family, you know, everything. And he lived in this neighborhood, and Ron was at work. He said he was at work, and he came home, and I think she was 9 or 10 year old daughter, the one that this happened with, Ron came home. She was sitting on the porch crying her eyes out. And, you know, Ron went up and was like, baby, what is wrong? And she went into telling him the story. And the story was, the neighbor across the street was this other family, and evidently this guy was a real asshole. Well, he held a knife, because I honestly couldn't tell you what all happened and why Ron's little girl got on this dude's bad side, what she had done to piss him off. But he held a knife to her throat. Didn't kill her, didn't hurt her, just scared the shit out of her. And, you know, she was 10 or 11 years old, and the dude holds a knife to your throat, you're going to get scared. I mean, I don't give a shit if you're 10 or 30. But either way, so she told Ron that story, and, you know, Ron comforted his little girl, and they went in the house. Well, later that night, Ron went over to that dude's house, had a gun, went in, and I can't make this up. He shot the man's brother, the man's older son. I think he was 19 or 20. He was an adult son. Shot the dog and shot the fish tank. He killed the fish. You know, but, you know, so he was in there, and he told me about all that. I'm like, Jesus Christ. I was like, there's some crazy ass people in here, man. I was like, what the hell is going on? But, you know, and like I said, he was old, and he'd been in there for like 35 years at this point. And the thing that stands out about him was he had to go to off grounds and go to a doctor or a hospital or something. It's a medical thing. But the guards took him, then he came back, and I went and checked on him. I was like, you okay, Ron? I was like, you know, everything good? And he just sat there and had this dumbfounded look on his face. And he's like, I don't know what that was. I was like, what the hell are you talking about, dude? And he said, we went to the doctor, and on our way back, the guards asked me if I was hungry, if I wanted something to eat. And Ron's like, yeah. So I told him, yeah, I was starving. He's like, he said, we pulled in to a restaurant, and we drove around back, and we pulled up to this big board, and the board started talking, and the driver started talking back, telling him what he wanted to eat. It was a drive-through. Ron had never seen a drive-through in his life, because like he'd been locked up for like 35 years, so he'd been in since like the 70s, early 70s, late 60s, something like that. So that to me was just funny because, you know, you don't think about stuff like that, you know, but he was shocked. He was out of his mind. He had no idea what happened and what that was and why he talked to that, why the guard talked to that big board and the board gave him food when he pulled around. So it was just kind of funny. It might have been one of those that you just had to be there to hear and see him tell a story, because his look in his face, like, we just pulled up and they started talking, and she was talking to him and he was talking to her, but there was nobody there. And just the look on his face was like the best shit I've ever seen in my life. But either way, all right, guys, that's some of the people that I've been locked up with, some of the little bits. I will get into, I know that next few videos I'm going to talk about side hustles and food and jobs and stuff that's in prison. So wait around, see what's going on, turn your little notification bell on, make sure you got that going, make sure you're subscribed, got that going, and make sure you leave a comment, got that going. Guys, thank you all so much. I hope you all have a wonderful freaking weekend, guys. And remember, you be safe when you're doing your weekend. Have a kick-ass day, people.